They slid an envelope containing $2,000 across the table, eyes heavy with the pity reserved for failures. They had no idea I had rejected a $40 billion buyout offer just this morning. They mistook my quiet demeanor for the shame of the unemployed. But silence is the sound of an empire being built. Tonight, when the red CNN logo sweeps across the living room television, they will realize the daughter they are trying to save is the one saving the world. My name is Phoebe Halston, and as I turned the ignition off, my 10-year-old Honda Civic let out a shuddering wheeze that sounded suspiciously like a dying lung. It was the only honest sound in Greenwich, Connecticut, this afternoon. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, watching the steam rise from the hood and dissipate into the crisp November air. To my left sat a gleaming silver Mercedes-Benz S-Class, waxed to a mirror finish that reflected my rusted fender back at me like a funhouse distortion. To my right was a Porsche Cayenne, black and intimidating, looking less like a vehicle and more like a weapon of suburban warfare, parked between them. My car looked like a dirty blemish on a pristine complexion. I could almost feel the property value of the driveway dropping just by my being there. This was the opening act of the Halston family Thanksgiving, a theatrical production where the set design was impeccable, the costumes were expensive, and the dialogue was laced with arsenic. I stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching loudly under my boots. I checked my reflection in the window of the Mercedes. My hair was pulled back in a messy bun, utilitarian and severe. I wore no makeup, not because I could not afford it, but because I did not see the point in painting a face that spent 18 hours a day staring into the blue light of monitors and holographic projections. I reached into the back seat and grabbed the bottle of wine I had bought at a gas station 3 miles down the road. It was a petty gesture. I admit, I could have brought a vintage bottle worth $5,000 from my personal cellar, but playing the role of the struggling artist required commitment to the props. The house loomed ahead, a colonial revival beast with white pillars that looked like they were trying to hold up the sky. A wreath made of dried autumn leaves and artisanal pine cones hung on the front door. Perfectly centered, it was aggressive in its seasonality. I took a breath, inhaling the scent of damp leaves and old money, and walked up the steps. Before I could even knock, the door swung open. "Phoebe, you made it!" It was not a greeting. It was an accusation. My sister, Bianca, stood in the doorway, blocking the warmth of the foyer like a toll booth operator. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater that probably cost more than the Kelley Blue Book value of my car, and her hair was blown out into golden waves that defied gravity and humidity alike. She did not hug me. Instead, her eyes performed a laser scan, starting at my boots, traveling up my faded jeans, pausing critically at my sweater, and finally resting on my face. It was a forensic analysis. She was looking for cracks, for signs of malnutrition, for the inevitable decay of someone who had fallen off the corporate ladder. "Hi, Bianca," I said, forcing a smile that felt like stretching rubber. "You are still wearing that coat," she said. It was not a question. "The gray wool one, from your last year at NASA? That was, 4 years ago?" "5 years," I corrected gently, "and it keeps me warm." "It has pilling on the sleeves." "Phoebe," she whispered, leaning in as if sharing a state secret. "It looks tired. You look tired. Are you eating? Your cheekbones are sharp enough to cut glass. Please tell me you are not skipping meals to save money again. We have plenty of leftovers you can take home." I stepped past her, the heat of the house hitting me. "I am eating fine, Bianca. I am actually on a very specific nutritional plan." "Ramen noodles and hope are not a nutritional plan," she retorted, closing the door behind me and shutting out the cold reality of the world. Inside, the house smelled of roasting turkey, sage, and the expensive perfume my mother wore like armor. The hallway was lined with family photos, a carefully curated timeline of success. There was Bianca at her graduation, Bianca and Mark at their wedding, Bianca receiving her Top 40 Under 40 award. There was one picture of me, from high school, before I became the family's cautionary tale. In the narrative my family had constructed, I was the tragedy. I was the prodigy who burned out. The valedictorian of Caltech who quit a prestigious government job to pursue freelance consulting, a phrase my father pronounced with the same distaste one might use for felony tax evasion. They imagined me huddled in my drafty studio apartment in the bad part of the city, counting pennies to pay for electricity, typing away at meaningless code for startups that would fail in a month. The reality was simpler and infinitely more complex. I did live in the city, but I owned the entire top 3 floors of the building. My drafty studio was a 4,000-square-foot penthouse with a climate-controlled server room and a direct fiber optic line to the private servers of Ethos Dynamics. While they thought I was hunting for gig work on Upwork, I was overseeing the deployment of the first transcontinental quantum energy grid. But I let them have their story. It made them feel superior, and it gave me the silence I needed to work. Phoebe! My mother, Eleanor Halston, emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel that was too white to have ever touched a dirty pot. She was the director of this stage play. Every hair was sprayed into submission. Her pearls gleamed under the chandelier. "Mom," I said, accepting her air kiss, which landed somewhere near my left ear so as not to smudge her lipstick. "You are late," she said, her voice tight. "The hors d'oeuvres have been out for 20 minutes. The stuffed mushrooms are getting cold." "There was traffic on the I-95, I lied. There was never traffic. I had been sitting in a parking lot for 30 minutes, finishing a conference call with the Secretary of Energy regarding the implementation of our new battery protocols. "Well, you are here now," she sighed, a sound that carried the weight of 1,000 disappointments. "Go put your coat in the closet, not the front closet, dear. It is full of Mark's and Bianca's things. Put it in the mudroom, and try to smooth out your hair. You look like you just woke up." I walked to the mudroom, hanging my coat on a lonely hook next to a mop. When I returned to the living room, the cast was fully assembled. My father, Robert Halston, sat in his leather armchair by the fire, a glass of scotch in one hand and the Wall Street Journal in the other. He looked like a statue of a patriarch. Rigid and imposing, my brother-in-law, Mark, was standing by the window, swirling his drink and laughing at something Bianca had said. Mark worked in hedge funds. He was the kind of man who thought the world existed to be leveraged. He wore a suit on Thanksgiving because he wanted everyone to know he could not be bothered to relax. "There she is," Mark announced, turning his broad, toothpaste-ad smile toward me. "The Phantom returns. How is the gig economy treating you? Phoebe, any big projects? Or still designing websites for dog walkers?" Bianca giggled, a sound that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. "Be nice, Mark. Phoebe is exploring her options. I am currently working on a system for optimizing energy distribution," I said, keeping my voice neutral. It was the truth, stripped of all the billion-dollar jargon. Right, Mark nodded patronizingly. "Coding. My cousin's kid does that. He is 19, makes decent pocket money fixing iPads." I walked over to the bar cart and poured myself a glass of sparkling water. I needed clarity. Alcohol would only dull the sharp edges of my restraint, and I needed every ounce of self-control to survive the next 4 hours. "So," Bianca said, linking her arm through Mark's as if they were posing for a magazine cover, "we have some news. Since Phoebe is finally here, we can share." "We just closed on the summer house," Mark beamed, puffing out his chest. "Martha's Vineyard, oceanfront, 5 bedrooms, heated pool, private dock. It is a beauty." "And," Bianca added, shimmering with pride, "I was promoted to Senior Vice President of Human Resources last week, the youngest in the company's history." "That is wonderful," I said. "Congratulations." "It is a lot of responsibility," Bianca said, looking at me with pity. "But the compensation package is incredible. We are thinking of getting a Tesla, to be green, since you are into that sort of thing. Phoebe." "Teslas are nice," I said. I did not mention that the battery technology in the Tesla she wanted to buy was licensed from a patent I filed 3 years ago under a shell corporation. Every time she drove it, she would be paying me a fraction of a cent. "You should come visit the Vineyard House in the summer," Mark said magnanimously. "If you can get time off, I know how it is when you're self-employed. If you do not work, you do not eat, right?" "Something like that," I murmured. My father lowered his newspaper. The rustling of the paper was the only sound in the room for a moment. He peered over his reading glasses, his eyes cold and assessing. "Speaking of the economy," he rumbled, his voice deep and authoritative, "the market is looking volatile. Inflation is up. Tech stocks are taking a beating. It is a dangerous time to be without a safety net. Phoebe." Here it comes. I thought, the lecture. "I am managing." "Dad," I said. "Managing?" He scoffed. "Managing is for people who are content with mediocrity. You had potential. Phoebe, you were the smartest person in any room you walked into, and now you are 32 years old, driving a car that belongs in a scrapyard, wearing clothes that look like donations. How long do you think you can keep this up? This drifting?" "I am not drifting," I said, tightening my grip on the glass. "I am building something." "Building what?" he demanded. "A retirement fund? A career? A reputation?" Because from where I sit, all I see is a void. You have no title, no office, no steady income. You are one medical emergency away from bankruptcy. Do you even have health insurance?" "I have insurance," I said. "The best private coverage money could buy. Actually, state-sponsored, I assume," he sneered. "Phoebe, look at your sister. Look at Mark. They followed the path. They worked hard. They made sacrifices. And look at the life they have built. You could have had that. You could have been running a research division at NASA by now if you had not walked away because of some artistic whim." "It was not a whim," I said quietly. "It was a divergence." "It was a mistake," he declared, snapping the newspaper shut. "And every day you persist in this charade. You compound that mistake. It is embarrassing. Frankly, when my friends ask what my youngest daughter is doing, I have to change the subject. I have to tell them you are consulting. I cannot tell them you are unemployed." "I am not unemployed," I repeated, but my voice lacked the force to penetrate his wall of judgment. "Dinner is almost ready," my mother chirped, clapping her hands together to break the tension, though she had been listening from the doorway the whole time. "Phoebe, come help me in the kitchen for a moment." It was a command, not a request. I followed her into the kitchen, the sanctuary of stainless steel and marble. The turkey sat on the counter, golden and glistening, a monument to her domestic perfection. She turned to me, her face crumbling from the hostess smile into a look of genuine distress. "Phoebe," she whispered, grabbing my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Please, for me, can you just try a little harder tonight? I am here. Mom, I am listening to Dad. I am being polite to Mark. What else do you want?" "I want you to stop looking so desperate," she hissed. "Mrs. Gable next door asked me yesterday if you had found a job yet. She saw your car parked out front last month and asked if you were the cleaning lady. Do you know how that makes me feel? To have to explain that my daughter, the genius, is struggling?" "I am not struggling," I said, feeling the familiar exhaustion settling in my bones. It was heavier than gravity. "Then show it," she snapped. "Lie if you must. Tell your father you have an interview. Tell Bianca you are seeing someone. Give us something. Phoebe, anything other than this vague nothingness. You are breaking your father's heart. He worries about you. We all do. We just want to fix you." "I am not broken," I said. "You are 32 and you have nothing to show for your life," she said, her voice trembling with tears. "If that is not broken, I do not know what is. Now, take this platter of green beans out, and please, try to smile. You look like you are at a funeral." I took the heavy ceramic platter. The heat radiated through the porcelain, burning my fingertips. I walked back toward the dining room, my face composed into a mask of neutral obedience. Inside my head, however, I was not in Connecticut. I was thousands of miles away, visualizing the schematic for the new quantum transfer nodes. I was calculating the load variance for the eastern seaboard grid. I was running simulations on the stability of the fusion containment field. Let E equal the total energy output. I thought as I placed the green beans on the table next to the cranberry sauce, if the thermal efficiency represented by ETA drops below 99%, the entire reaction destabilizes. My father was talking about interest rates. Bianca was talking about the thread count of her new sheets. Mark was checking his watch. They are the noise. I told myself, I am the signal. I sat down at the table, the seat assigned to me at the far end, away from the center, away from the power. I unfolded my napkin and placed it on my lap. I looked at the crystal wine glass, reflecting the candlelight. So, Bianca said, picking up her fork and pointing it at me like a baton. Let us talk about this project of yours. Does it actually have a name, or is it just Phoebe's little experiment? I looked at her. I looked at all of them. It has a name, I said softly. Oh? Mark chuckled, reaching for the rolls. Do enlighten us. What is it called? Save the Whales Incorporated. It is complicated, I said, retreating again. Pass the potatoes, please. See? My father groaned, pouring wine into his glass. She cannot even explain it. If you cannot explain your business in one sentence, you do not have a business. You have a hobby. I took a spoonful of potatoes. They were cold. Just endure it. I thought, just a few more hours. Then I could get back in my car, drive back to the city, and finish the code that would make fossil fuels obsolete within a decade. We just want you to be realistic. Phoebe, my mother said, smiling tightly from the other end of the table. We are only hard on you because we love you. We want you to have a future. I chewed slowly, swallowing the bitterness along with the food. If only they knew. The future was not something I needed to have. The future was something I was writing, line by line, while they were busy judging the cover of the book. The carving knife glided through the turkey breast with surgical precision, the only sound competing with the soft hum of the central heating and the aria of self-congratulation being performed by my sister. The dining room felt less like a place of communal gathering and more like a corporate boardroom where the quarterly earnings were being announced. And I was the division slated for liquidation. Bianca had been talking for 12 minutes straight. I knew this because I had been counting the seconds between bites of dry stuffing, timing her breaths like a diver monitoring oxygen levels. You simply cannot imagine the light in Tuscany this time of year, Bianca said, gesturing with a fork that carried a piece of turkey she had no intention of eating. It is not like the sun here. It is golden. It is substantial. Mark and I chartered this private boat to take us around the coast, just the two of us and the captain. It cost us nearly $8,000 for the afternoon, which sounds like a lot, but for that kind of privacy, it was a bargain. Worth every penny, Mark chimed in, leaning back in his chair, the fabric of his suit straining slightly against his chest. We worked hard this year. We earned a little decadence, especially with that bonus coming in. Did Bianca tell you? Dad? The year-end projection for her department is up 20%. 20%, my father repeated, nodding with profound approval. He looked at Bianca as if she were a blue-chip stock he had invested in at the right time. That is excellent work, sweetheart. That is how you build a legacy. Consistency. Growth. Exactly, Bianca beamed, basking in the glow of his validation. We are thinking of redoing the kitchen in the city apartment, too. I saw this marble slab imported from Italy that costs $15,000, but it has these gray veins that match the backsplash perfectly. I kept my eyes on my plate. Pushing a singular P around in a circle, I was calculating the energy density required to transport that marble slab across the Atlantic versus the aesthetic utility it provided. The equation did not balance. Suddenly, the spotlight shifted. I felt the change in atmospheric pressure before I heard the words. The silence at the table was heavy, directed entirely at me. "So," Mark said, his voice dropping an octave, feigning a casual interest that fooled absolutely no one. "Enough about our wins. Let us talk about you. Phoebe, how is the whatever it is you are doing? Still waiting for that big break?" I looked up. Mark was swirling his red wine, watching me over the rim of the glass. His eyes held a mixture of amusement and disdain, the look a wolf gives a wounded rabbit. "Things are going well, Mark," I said evenly. "We are moving into the final testing phase." "Testing phase," Mark repeated, savoring the ambiguity of the words. "Right. And does this testing phase pay the rent? Or are you still burning through that savings account like it is kind of fuel?" "I have enough to cover my expenses," I replied. "You do not need to worry about my finances." "We are family, Phoebe," Bianca interjected, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Of course we worry. It has been 5 years. 5 years of you living in the shadows, working on something nobody ever sees. It is just, well, concerning. We see you wearing the same clothes, driving that death trap of a car. It does not look like things are going well. Appearance is not a metric of success," I stated. Bianca let out a short, sharp laugh. It sounded like glass breaking. "Oh, Phoebe, grow up. In the real world, appearance is everything. If you cannot afford to buy a new coat, you cannot afford to be an entrepreneur." She reached into her pocket and pulled out her latest iPhone, the screen glowing bright in the dim room. She tapped on it with a manicured nail, the sound distinct and rhythmic. "Look," she said, sliding the phone across the polished mahogany table toward me. "I was looking at our internal portal this morning. There is an opening in my department. It is an administrative assistant role, scheduling, filing, answering phones. It is entry level, obviously, and the pay is only $45,000 a year to start. But it comes with full benefits, dental, vision, a matching 401k. I looked down at the screen. The job description was a wall of text describing the duties of a servant. Must be willing to fetch coffee. Must be organized. Must have a pleasant demeanor. "I can pull some strings," Bianca continued, her voice taking on the tone of a benevolent queen bestowing charity upon a peasant. "The hiring manager owes me a favor. I can get your resume to the top of the pile. You would have to interview, of course, and you would need to buy a few new suits, but I could lend you the money for that." My father stopped chewing. He looked from the phone to me, his eyebrows raised in expectation. "That is a generous offer, Bianca, very generous." "I am not interested," I said, sliding the phone back across the table without touching the screen. The air in the room vanished. "Excuse me?" my father asked, his voice low and dangerous. "I said I am not interested," I repeated, keeping my voice steady, though my heart rate had spiked to 90 beats per minute. "I am not an administrative assistant. I am a quantum engineer. I am not going to file papers for a human resources department. You are not suitable for a traditional office environment anyway," I added, trying to soften the blow with logic. "My skill set is specialized. It would be a waste of resources." My father slammed his hand down on the table. The silverware jumped. The wine in the glasses rippled. "A waste of resources?" he roared. "The only waste I see here is you. Phoebe, who do you think you are? You are sitting there, eating my food, drinking my wine, with holes in your shoes, and you turn down a $45,000 job? Do you think you are too good for honest work?" "I am doing work, Dad," I said, my grip on the napkin tightening until my knuckles turned white. "Just because you do not understand it does not mean it is not work." "We understand that you are unemployed," he shouted. "We understand that you are delusional. You are delusional. You want the world to hand you a CEO title because you got good grades in college? That is not how life works. You have to start at the bottom." "I did start at the bottom," I said. "I built my own bottom." "Oh, please," Bianca scoffed, rolling her eyes. "You sound just like Cousin Jimmy." A collective groan went around the table. Cousin Jimmy was the family pariah, a man who had sunk his inheritance into a chain of ferret-themed cafes and now delivered pizzas in New Jersey to pay off his bankruptcy lawyers. "That is exactly right," Mark agreed, pointing a fork at me. "Jimmy always had a big project too, remember? He was going to revolutionize the pet industry. Now he has revolutionized the art of getting pepperoni to a doorstep in 30 minutes or less. Is that what you want? Phoebe? Do you want to be 40 years old and delivering pizzas?" "There is a significant difference between ferret cafes and sustainable energy infrastructure," I said coldly. "Is there?" my mother asked. It was the first time she had spoken in a while. She looked at me with tragic, watery eyes. "Because from the outside, it looks the same. Phoebe, it looks like refusal to grow up." "Let us look at the facts," my father said, adopting his courtroom persona. "You graduated first in your class at Caltech. Brilliant. Everyone expected great things. You went to NASA, a government job, secure, pension, prestige, and then what? You quit? You walked out the door 5 years ago to do what? To sit in your apartment and tinker with batteries?" "It is not just batteries," I insisted. "It is a new method of electron transfer. It solves the intermittency problem of renewable energy. It is the key to stopping climate change." I saw the reaction immediately. It was not curiosity. It was not respectful. It was pity mixed with amusement. Mark actually snorted into his wine glass. Bianca covered her mouth to hide a smile. "Okay, Captain Planet," Mark laughed. "Mark, so you are going to save the world, you alone, in your living room, while the rest of us just work for a living. It sounds like science fiction, honey," my mother said gently, as if explaining to a toddler that dragons were not real. "It sounds like one of those movies you used to watch, but this is the real world. In the real world, people need salaries. They need titles. I am solving a global crisis," I said, and for the first time. My voice wavered slightly, cracked by the sheer density of their ignorance. "The energy grid is failing. Fossil fuels are dying. My technology can power a city the size of New York for a year on a device the size of a suitcase. And I can fly if I flap my arms hard enough," Bianca mocked. "Listen to yourself. Phoebe, you sound manic. Have you seen a therapist lately?" "I am serious. Delusions of grandeur are a symptom. You know." "She is right," my father said, cutting through the noise. "This has gone on long enough. I have indulged this fantasy for 5 years because I thought you would snap out of it. I thought you would hit rock bottom and come to your senses. But you are stubborn. You are so incredibly stubborn." He pointed a finger at me, a weapon of judgment. "You have a CV that looks like Swiss cheese," he said. 5 years of nothing. Do you know what hiring managers do with a resume that has a 5-year gap? They throw it in the trash. Bianca is offering you a lifeline, a miracle, and you are spitting in her face." "I am not spitting in her face," I said. "I am telling you that I do not need a lifeline because I am not drowning. I am swimming." "You are treading water," my father yelled, "and you are swallowing a lot of it while you deny it." My mother reached out and touched my hand. Her skin was cold. "Phoebe, listen to your father. Listen to your sister. Passion is a wonderful thing. It really is. But passion does not pay the electric bill. Passion does not buy groceries. Passion does not put a roof over your head. You have to be realistic. Please, just take the job. Just go to the interview. For me? So I can sleep at night without worrying that my daughter is going to starve?" I looked at her. I looked at the genuine fear in her eyes. She truly believed I was on the brink of destitution. She could not conceive of a world where success did not look like a corner office and a monthly paycheck from a corporation someone else owned. "I cannot take the job. Mom," I said quietly. "Why?" she pleaded. "Why are you so difficult?" "Because I am busy," I said. Bianca laughed again, louder this time. "Busy doing what? Dreaming?" "Busy waiting for the world to catch up," I muttered. But I said it so softly that none of them heard. "You are impossible," my father declared, signaling the end of the debate. "Absolutely impossible. If you end up like Jimmy, do not come crying to my doorstep. I am warning you. Phoebe, my patience is not infinite." "Neither is mine," I thought. "Eat your turkey," my father commanded. "And think about what Bianca offered. You have until the end of the week to apologize to her and ask for that interview. If you do not expect any Christmas gifts this year. I am not funding your delusions anymore." I picked up my fork. The metal felt heavy in my hand. I cut a piece of the dry, tasteless bird and put it in my mouth. I chewed mechanically. They wanted me to be small. They wanted me to fit into the box they had built for me. A box labeled administrative assistant and failure. They wanted to save me by destroying the only thing that made me who I was. I swallowed the turkey. It tasted like ash. "Thank you for the advice," I said, my voice void of any emotion. "I will take it under advisement," Bianca smirked. Triumphant. She thought she had won. She thought she had broken the wild horse. She turned back to Mark. "So, about the Tesla," she said, her voice light and conversational again. "I was thinking silver, to match the Mercedes." I took a sip of water to wash down the dryness in my throat. I looked at the clock on the wall. 7:30. The announcement was scheduled for 8 o'clock. 30 minutes. I just had to survive 30 more minutes of being the family failure before I became their god. The silence that descended after the main course was different from the awkward pauses that had peppered the dinner conversation. This was a heavy, calculated silence, the kind that precedes an execution or an intervention. My mother and father exchanged a look across the centerpiece of autumnal gourds, a glance so practiced and synchronized, it could only have been rehearsed. It was the signal. The curtain was rising on the second act of their carefully staged drama. My mother reached into her purse, which she had kept suspiciously close to her chair throughout the meal. She pulled out a white envelope. It was thick, bulging slightly in the middle, and she placed it on the table with a trembling hand. With 2 manicured fingers, she slid it across the mahogany surface. It hissed softly as it moved over the wood, bypassing the gravy boat and the untouched cranberry sauce, until it came to rest directly in front of my plate. I stared at it. It looked innocent enough, but I knew better. In this house, nothing given was ever free. Every gift came with a mortgage of emotional debt. "Open it, Phoebe," my father commanded softly. His voice had lost its earlier edge of aggression and was now coated in a thick, suffocating layer of paternal benevolence. I did not want to touch it. I wanted to stand up, walk out the door, and drive away. But the gravitational pull of family obligation is strong. Even when the family in question treats you like a reclamation project, I picked up the envelope. It felt heavy. I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out the contents. A stack of bills fell into my hand. $200 bills, $2,000 in cash. But that was not all. Behind the crisp currency was a jagged stack of paper clippings. I unfolded them and felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. They were coupons. Not just any coupons, but the kind one cuts from the Sunday circulars. Buy one, get one free on canned soup, 50 cents off generic laundry detergent, a voucher for a free sandwich at a fast food chain that I had not eaten at since high school. "Your mother and I have been talking," my father said, leaning forward, his elbows resting on the table. "We know things are tight for you. We know you are too proud to ask for help, but you are our daughter, and we cannot sit by and watch you drown. We want you to take this," my mother added, her eyes swimming with tears that threatened to spill over and ruin her foundation. "For your rent next month, for groceries, just so you have a little breathing room." I looked at the money. $2,000. Yesterday morning, I had authorized a wire transfer of $5 million to the Global Reforestation Initiative. I had done it while brushing my teeth, tapping the approval on my secure tablet with a mouthful of toothpaste. The transaction had taken 3 seconds. The notification from the bank had been a simple ping. I had not even blinked. And now, here sat $2,000, presented to me as if it were the Holy Grail. accompanied by coupons for discounted soup. The irony was not funny, it was physical. It felt like a stone in my throat. They thought they were saving me from starvation. They thought this envelope was the difference between me having a roof over my head or sleeping on a park bench. They had absolutely no concept of the universe I actually inhabited. "And that is not all," Bianca chimed in, wiping her mouth with her napkin and offering me a benevolent smile that did not reach her eyes. "I went through my closet this morning. I pulled out 3 boxes of clothes, suits, blouses, some skirts. Most of them are from 2 seasons ago, but they are still in great condition. Brands like Theory and Vince, professional clothes." She paused, waiting for my gratitude. "You can wear them to your interviews," she continued. "Once you accept that you need to start applying, you will need to look the part. You cannot walk into an office wearing whatever that is you are wearing now." I looked down at my simple black sweater. It was cashmere, hand-woven in Italy, and it cost $900. But to them, without a visible logo or a flashy cut, it was just a black sweater. "The boxes are in the garage," Bianca said. "Do not forget to put them in your car before you leave. There is a really nice navy blazer in there. It is a size 4, so it might be a little big on you since you have lost so much weight, but you can get it tailored. Well, if you can afford a tailor. If not, maybe Mom can pin it for you." I felt the blood rising in my neck. It was a slow, burning heat. It was the heat of humiliation. Not because I was poor, but because I was being erased. They were looking right at me, but they saw a ghost. They saw a projection of their own fears and insecurities. They saw a loser. I ran my thumb over the edge of the grocery coupons. The paper was cheap and rough. "I cannot take this," I said. The words hung in the air, fragile and dangerous. "What?" my mother whispered. "I cannot take this money," I said, my voice gaining strength. "And I do not need the coupons, or the clothes." I neatly restacked the bills and the clippings, slid them back into the envelope, and pushed it back across the table. It came to rest in the center, a white flag of surrender that I was refusing to wave. "I am financially stable," I said, looking my father in the eye. "I pay my rent. I buy my own groceries. I do not need charity." "Stable?" My father laughed. A harsh, barking sound. "Phoebe, you are driving a car that is old enough to vote. You live in a rent-controlled apartment. You have no job. How can you possibly be stable? Are you borrowing money? Do you have credit card debt? Is that it? Are you in debt?" "I have 0 debt," I said. It was true. I had paid off my student loans the day I signed my first patent deal. I had bought my penthouse in cash. I had no mortgage. I owned everything I touched. "Then take the money," he insisted, his voice rising. "Why do you have to be so difficult? Why does everything have to be a battle with you? We are trying to help you." "I do not need help," I said, sharper than I intended. "I am telling you, I am fine. Why can you not believe me?" "Because the evidence says otherwise," Bianca interjected. "Look at yourself. Phoebe. Look at your life. You have nothing. You are 32 and you are nobody. We are just trying to give you a boost so you can stop pretending and start living in the real world." I gripped the edge of the table. The wood dug into my palms. "I do not want your old clothes, Bianca," I said quietly. "I do not want to dress up in your cast-offs and pretend to be an administrative assistant so you can feel better about yourself. I am not your charity case." "You are ungrateful," my father spat. The word was like a slap. "Ungrateful and arrogant. Your mother spent all morning clipping those coupons for you. She went to the bank specifically to get cash because she knows you probably do not even have a bank account with a positive balance, and you throw it back in her face?" "I am not throwing it back," I said. "I am declining it. There is a difference." "There is no difference to us," he shouted. His face was turning a dangerous shade of red. "You think you are so smart. You think you are above everyone else. But let me tell you something. Phoebe, intelligence is worthless without application. You are wasting your life. You are wasting your potential. And now, you are insulting your family." He stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. He loomed over the table, a giant of judgment. "I have had enough," he declared. "I have coddled you. I have made excuses for you. I have hoped that you would grow out of this phase, but clearly, you need a wake-up call." He pointed a finger at me, shaking with rage. "Here is the deal," he said. "You have until Christmas, that is 1 month, by Christmas Day. I want to see an offer letter. I want to see a business card with a real company logo on it. I want to see proof of health insurance. I want to see that you are a productive member of society." "Robert," my mother gasped. "Please." "No, Eleanor," he cut her off. "She needs to hear this. If you do not have a real job by Christmas, Phoebe, then we are done. I am cutting you off. You will not be welcome in this house. You will not be part of this family. I will not have a daughter who chooses to be a bum." "A bum?" I repeated. The word tasted sour. "A bum," he confirmed. "Someone who contributes nothing. Someone who leeches off the emotional labor of others while pretending to be superior. If you want to live like a starving artist, go ahead. But you will do it without us. No more holiday dinners, no more birthday checks, no more pretending everything is fine. You are either a Halston, which means you succeed, or you are a stranger." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had taught me how to ride a bicycle, who had paid for my piano lessons, who had cried when I got into Caltech, and I realized that his love was entirely conditional. It was a contract. I had breached the terms of service, and now he was terminating the account. I looked at my mother. She had her face buried in her hands, weeping silently. She would not stand up for me. She never did. Her loyalty was to the image of the perfect family, and I was the crack in the lens. I looked at Bianca. She was watching me with a mixture of shock and satisfaction. This was what she wanted. She wanted me exiled. She wanted to be the only daughter, the only success story. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of adrenaline and sorrow. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull out my phone and show them my bank balance. I wanted to show them the article in Forbes that called me the architect of the future. I wanted to tell them that the President of the United States had my personal cell phone number. But I could not like this, not as a defense. If I told them now, it would look like I was trying to win their approval. It would look like I was begging to be accepted back into the fold. I did not want their approval anymore. I wanted them to see me. So I said nothing. I clenched my hands into fists under the table, squeezing so hard that my fingernails cut into my palms. The pain was grounding. It kept me from crying. It kept me from breaking. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the cooling turkey and the stale air of judgment. I prepared to stand up. I prepared to walk out of that house forever. And then, the sound cut through the tension like a knife. It came from the living room, where the 60-inch television had been left on, muted, displaying a slideshow of family photos. But someone, perhaps Mark, in his boredom earlier, must have unmuted it. Or perhaps the breaking news alert was designed to override the volume settings. The aggressive, urgent electronic pulse of the CNN breaking news stinger filled the room. Dum-dum-dum-dum. It was a sound that commanded attention. It was the sound of disaster, of war, of history being made. My father stopped mid-breath. Bianca turned her head. Mark, who had been staring at his shoes, looked up. We all turned toward the glowing screen in the adjacent room. The family slideshow was gone. The screen was a wall of urgent red graphics. The anchor, Anderson Cooper, sat at his desk, his face serious, his eyes locked on the camera. The chyron at the bottom of the screen pulsed with yellow text. My father looked at the screen, annoyed by the interruption to his ultimatum. He reached for the remote to turn it off, to regain control of his narrative. But before his finger could press the button, the headline shifted. The text was large, bold, and impossible to ignore. I sat frozen in my chair, my fists uncurled slowly under the table. My heart stopped its frantic beating and settled into a slow, heavy thud. The timing was impeccable. It was almost as if I had written the code for reality itself. The room went silent, but this time, it was not the silence of judgment. It was the silence of the world shifting on its axis. The atmosphere in the dining room, previously thick with the petty grievances of a suburban family, was suddenly punctured by the weight of global events. I watched the red light from the television screen reflect in my father's eyes. I watched the annoyance on his face turn to confusion. I did not need to speak. I did not need to defend myself. The universe was about to do it for me. The red glow of the television washed over the dining room table, casting a crimson hue on the congealed gravy and the untouched cranberry sauce. It made us all look like we were sitting in a darkroom developing a photograph. Waiting for the image to become clear, Anderson Cooper's face was a mask of professional gravity. The banner at the bottom of the screen was not just scrolling, it was flashing, demanding the attention of every retina in the room. Historic announcement. Project Helios. Perpetual energy solution. Daras. Turn it up, Mark commanded, his voice snapping with a sudden, electric urgency that had been absent all evening. He dropped his fork, the metal clattering against the china. Bianca, where's the remote? Turn it up. Now. Mark, we are in the middle of a family discussion, my mother protested weakly, her hand still hovering near the rejected envelope of cash. We are trying to help Phoebe. Forget Phoebe for a second, Mark said, his eyes glued to the screen. Do you see that headline? Perpetual energy. If this is real, the markets are going to open tomorrow in a free fall. I need to know if I should dump our oil futures before the Asian markets wake up. My father, sensing the shift in power, grabbed the remote from the sideboard and pressed the volume button. The voice of Anderson Cooper filled the room, replacing the heavy silence of judgment with the crisp, authoritative cadence of global news. Sources at the White House have confirmed what has been rumored in Silicon Valley for weeks, Cooper said. Aethirus Dynamics, the secretive energy firm based in California, has just signed a bilateral exclusivity agreement with the United States Department of Energy and the European Union Commission. Aethirus? Mark muttered, leaning forward, his elbows digging into the tablecloth. I have heard of them. Vaporware. Nobody knows anything about them. They have been in stealth mode for 3 years. The deal, Cooper continued, his voice rising slightly to emphasize the magnitude of the figure, is reportedly valued at $300 billion over the next 10 years. $300 billion? Bianca gasped. Is that real? It is the single largest government contract in the history of the energy sector, the reporter clarified, as if answering her question. To put that in perspective, it dwarfs the initial public offering of most tech giants. This is not just a company. This is a geopolitical shift. $300 billion, Mark repeated, a look of pure, unadulterated greed spreading across his face. He pulled out his phone again, his thumbs flying across the screen. Who are they? They are private. Damn it. We cannot buy stock. Who backs them? Is it Saudi money? Is it Musk? It has to be big oil pivoting to green tech. I sat perfectly still. I reached for my wine glass. My movements slow and deliberate. The liquid was a deep, dark red, matching the warning lights on the television screen. I took a sip. It was a cheap Cabernet, acidic and sharp, but in that moment, it tasted like nectar. I watched them. I watched the way their eyes lit up at the mention of billions. Minutes ago, they were ready to disown me for not having a $45,000 a year job. Now, they were salivating over a number that was so large it was abstract to them. They were sharks smelling blood in the water, unaware that the blood was their own. It says here, Mark said, reading from a financial news app on his phone while listening to the TV, that Aethirus has developed a quantum battery that does not degrade. Zero degradation, infinite cycles. That is impossible. That violates the laws of thermodynamics. Unless they rewrote them, I said softly. Hush, Phoebe, my father snapped, not even looking at me. We are trying to listen. This affects my pension fund. The implications are staggering, Cooper said on the screen. This technology, known as the Helios node, renders fossil fuels effectively obsolete for grid storage, and the company behind it, Aethirus Dynamics, has remained a complete enigma until tonight. The screen cut to a B-roll footage of a building. My building. The Aethirus headquarters in Palo Alto. It was a sleek, silver structure that looked like a shard of glass piercing the earth. I knew every inch of that building. I knew the specific hum of the servers in the basement. I knew the smell of the coffee in the third-floor break room. "Look at that campus," Bianca said, wistful envy in her voice. "That looks expensive. I bet they have amazing benefits." "Mark, do you think they need HR directors? If they are scaling up like this, they will need infrastructure. They are based in California." "Bianca," Mark dismissed her. "Besides, you do not want to work for a startup. It is chaos. The CEO is probably some 20-year-old dropout who sleeps under his desk, or some old eccentric billionaire who wants to play God." "Actually," the reporter said, bringing the camera back to the studio, "speculation regarding the leadership of Aethirus has been rampant. Most analysts predicted a consortium of veteran energy executives, but CNN has obtained exclusive confirmation regarding the identity of the founder and chief executive officer." "Here we go," Mark said, rubbing his hands together. "Bet you $10 it is a spin-off from a defense contractor. Some old guy named General something or other? Or maybe it is a foreign entity," my father suggested, his brow furrowed with patriotic concern. "If the Chinese are behind this—" "It is an American company, Dad," Bianca said. "They just said they signed with the U.S. government." "Tonight," Anderson Cooper said, pausing for dramatic effect, "we can reveal the face behind the $300 billion deal, the architect of the future." The camera zoomed in on a graphic behind the news anchor. It was a silhouette, a black void in the shape of a person. My mother reached for the remote. "Okay, that is enough," she said, her voice shrill. "We are not going to spend our Thanksgiving watching the news. We have family matters to discuss. Phoebe still hasn't agreed to take the clothes." "No, wait," Mark shouted, actually reaching out and grabbing my mother's wrist to stop her. "Mom, stop. Do you not understand? This is history. This changes the entire market. I need to know who this is, so I can see who their competitors are and short their stocks. This is how you make real money, not by clipping coupons." My mother recoiled, shocked by Mark's aggression, but she pulled her hand back. "Fine," she huffed. "But quickly, then we are turning it off." "Phoebe," my father said, turning his attention back to me for a fleeting second, his eyes still glazed over with the prospect of financial ruin or gain. "Pay attention. This is what success looks like. This is what ambition looks like. Whoever this person is, they built something. They did not just sit around consulting. You should take notes." "I am taking notes." "Dad," I said, "I am memorizing every word." On the screen, the silhouette began to fade. "The founder of Aethirus Dynamics is not a traditional energy tycoon," the reporter's voiceover began. "She is a mathematician and engineer who has operated in total secrecy for the last 5 years." "She?" Bianca blinked. "Is it a woman?" "Probably inherited it," Mark scoffed immediately. "Daddy's money. There is no way a woman built a $300 billion hardware company from scratch in 5 years, not without a massive inheritance." "Shh," Bianca hissed. "She is a former government researcher," the reporter continued, "a prodigy who entered Caltech at 16. My father's head snapped up. The fork he had picked up froze halfway to his mouth. "Caltech?" he whispered. "Lots of people go to Caltech." "Robert," my mother said dismissively, "it is a big school." She left the public sector 5 years ago to pursue a vision that many called impossible, the voice on the TV said. While her peers were building social media apps, she was solving the equation for quantum stability. The air in the room began to change. It was a subtle shift, like the pressure drop before a hurricane. The coincidence was starting to prick at the edges of their awareness, but their denial was a fortress. It was too thick to be breached by mere similarities. 5 years ago, Bianca murmured. She looked at me. Then she looked back at the TV. Then she shook her head, a small, involuntary twitch. No, that is stupid. What is stupid? Mark asked, his eyes still glued to the screen. Nothing, Bianca said. Phoebe went to Caltech, and she left NASA 5 years ago. Mark laughed. It was a loud, boisterous guffaw that echoed off the high ceilings. Bianca, please, are you suggesting that Phoebe, our Phoebe, the one who is currently wearing a sweater with a hole in the sleeve, is the secret CEO of a $300 billion company? That is the funniest thing I've heard all night. He gestured to me with his wine glass. Look at her. She is eating the cranberry sauce because it is free. Does that look like a billionaire to you? I looked at Mark. I did not blink. I did not smile. I just stared at him with the cold, hard detachment of a scientist observing a specimen that was about to be dissected. You are right. Mark, I said. It does sound ridiculous. See? Mark grinned. Even she knows it. No offense, Phoebe. But you are not exactly executive material. You are too soft, too quiet. You need a killer instinct to run a company like that. Killer instinct, I repeated. I will keep that in mind. And now, the anchor announced, CNN is proud to present the first public interview with the woman who has just saved the global energy grid. The screen flickered. The graphic dissolved. Get ready, Mark said, leaning forward until his nose was almost touching the centerpiece. Let us see the face of the new queen of Wall Street. My mother sighed loudly. Can we please turn it off after this? I really want to discuss Phoebe's interview strategy. Just 1 second. Eleanor, my father snapped. I set my wine glass down on the table. The sound of the glass hitting the wood was a sharp clink. It is okay, Mom, I said. We do not need to discuss my interview strategy anymore. What do you mean? She asked, looking at me with annoyance. I said, pointing a finger at the giant screen on the wall. I think the interview has already started. They all turned to look. The screen was no longer red. It showed a studio setting. A woman was sitting across from Anderson Cooper. She was wearing a sharp charcoal gray power suit. Her hair was styled, but not in the frivolous way Bianca's was. It was sleek, professional. Her makeup was minimal but flawless. But the eyes were the same. The chin was the same. The camera zoomed in on her face. The room went dead silent. The kind of silence that happens when a bomb goes off. Before the sound wave actually hits you. My father's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Mark dropped his phone. It hit the floor with a heavy thud, cracking the screen, but he did not look down. Bianca let out a sound that was half gasp, half whimper. My mother squinted, leaning forward, trying to reconcile the image on the screen with the daughter sitting 5 feet away from her. On the screen, the chyron updated. The bold yellow letters spelled out a name they knew, a name they had spoken with contempt only moments ago. I watched the realization hit them like a physical blow. It was violent. It was absolute. Shall we turn up the volume a little more? I asked calmly. I believe she is about to speak. The woman on the TV smiled. It was a small, knowing smile, and at the exact same moment, in the dining room in Connecticut, I smiled too. The synchronization was perfect. The storm had arrived, and the roof was about to be torn off. Hello, Anderson, the woman on the screen said. Her voice was my voice. Thank you for having me. No, my mother whispered, her hand flying to her throat. That is not. Phoebe? My father croaked. I did not answer him. I just watched the screen, where the caption read, Phoebe Halston, founder, CEO, Aetherius Dynamics. Net worth, undisclosed. But Mark, the finance guy, the numbers guy, he knew what undisclosed meant when you owned 85% of a $300 billion deal. He looked at me, and for the first time in his life, He looked afraid. "Happy Thanksgiving," I whispered. The television screen became a portal to another dimension, one that made the crown molding and antique sideboard of my parents' dining room look like artifacts from a forgotten civilization. The image on the screen was crisp, high definition, and utterly alien to the aesthetic of Greenwich, Connecticut. It showed the Ethos Dynamics headquarters in Silicon Valley, a sprawling campus of glass and curved steel that seemed to hover above the ground rather than sit upon it. Sunlight glinted off the solar skins that wrapped the structures, creating a halo of blinding white light. It was a cathedral of the future, a place where the laws of physics were bent and broken on a daily basis. The camera panned over the manicured grounds, showing employees moving with purpose, not in suits and ties, but in the uniform of the new elite, hoodies, jeans, and badges that granted access to secrets worth trillions. The voiceover narration returned, deep and resonant, cutting through the ambient noise of the room. "But the mind behind this revolution is not a veteran of the oil industry," the narrator said. "Nor is it a political heavyweight or a Silicon Valley fixture we have seen on magazine covers for decades. The sole founder and architect of the Helios project is a 32-year-old female engineer." Bianca let out a breathy, dismissive sound that was halfway between a scoff and a laugh. She reached for her wine glass, her eyes narrowing as she judged the invisible woman on the screen. "A female?" she said, the word tasting sour in her mouth. 32? Please, she's probably some heiress, another Nepo baby, whose daddy bought her a laboratory so she could play scientist. You do not get to that level at that age without a trust fund backing you up. Or she slept her way there, Mark muttered, his eyes still scanning the ticker at the bottom of the screen, looking for a stock symbol that did not exist. "Find the husband. That is where the money is." I watched them. I watched the way they projected their own limitations onto a stranger. They could not conceive of a world where meritocracy actually existed, because in their world, everything was transactional. Success was something you were given, or something you married, or something you stole. It was never something you built with your own two hands in the quiet hours before dawn. "Tonight," the narrator continued, "we reveal the face of the new era." The footage of the campus faded. The screen went black for a fraction of a second, a dramatic pause calculated to spike the heart rates of millions of viewers. Then, the image appeared. It was a studio portrait, high contrast, black and white. It was stark, stripping away all the noise and leaving only the essence of the subject. The woman in the photo was wearing a tailored suit, the lapels sharp enough to draw blood. Her hair was pulled back, revealing a face that was composed, intelligent, and terrifyingly calm. Her chin was tilted up slightly, not in arrogance, but in challenge. Her eyes looked directly into the camera lens, piercing through the glass of the television and striking the viewer in the chest. It was a face that demanded silence. It was a face that commanded armies. It was my face. But it was not the face of the woman sitting at the dining table. The Phoebe in the room was hunched slightly, wearing a pilling wool sweater, her hair escaping from a messy bun. The Phoebe on the screen was a titan. The Phoebe in the room was a ghost. And yet, the bone structure was identical. The curve of the jaw, the shape of the nose, the singular, distinctive scar above the left eyebrow, a faint white line from a childhood bicycle accident that my mother had always lamented as a flaw. In the photograph, the scar was not hidden. It was highlighted. It was a badge of survival. Below the image, the text animated onto the screen, letter by letter, burning itself into the retinas of everyone in the room. Phoebe Halston, founder, CEO, Ethos Dynamics. The name was written in a sans serif font, modern and bold. It took up the entire lower third of the 60-inch screen. Time did not just stop, it disintegrated. The seconds stretched out into hours. The air in the room seemed to solidify, turning into a gelatinous substance that trapped sound and motion. I saw a fork slip from my father's fingers. It fell in slow motion, tumbling end over end. I tracked its rotation, It hit the edge of his porcelain plate with a violence that seemed disproportionate to its size. The sound was a sharp, high-pitched crack that reverberated like a gunshot in a canyon. Clang. Nobody moved to pick it up. Nobody breathed. My mother was the first to react, though her reaction was a rejection of reality. She squinted, her eyes crinkling at the corners as she leaned forward, her neck straining. Her hand rose slowly, a trembling limb that seemed to belong to someone else. She pointed a manicured finger at the television, her nail polish a perfect shade of denial red. "What?" she whispered. The word had no inflection. It was just a breath. She looked at the screen. Then she turned her head mechanically to look at me. Her eyes darted back and forth, comparing the data points. Screen, daughter, screen, daughter. "What is that?" she stammered. Her brain was misfiring. The cognitive dissonance was so severe, it was almost causing a physical seizure. She could not reconcile the image of the billionaire on CNN with the image of the failure she had just tried to bribe with grocery coupons. The two realities could not coexist, and her mind was fracturing under the strain. "That looks like," she tried again, her voice cracking. "Robert, that looks like—" My father did not answer. He was frozen. His face had drained of all color, leaving him a waxy, gray complexion that looked like death. His mouth hung slightly open, the muscles of his jaw slack. He was staring at the name on the screen. Phoebe Halston. He blinked. Once, twice. He was waiting for the letters to rearrange themselves. He was waiting for it to say Phoebe Smith or Phoebe Jones. He was waiting for the universe to correct the mistake. But the letters remained. Mark was the one who vocalized the impossible logic they were all clinging to. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping backward with a guttural groan against the hardwood floor. He walked toward the television as if drawn by a magnetic force. He stood 3 feet away from the screen, staring up at the giant image of my face. He looked back at me. I was sipping my wine. I lowered the glass, meeting his gaze. "Impossible," Mark whispered. He shook his head violently. "No, no way. It is a coincidence. It has to be." He turned to Bianca, searching for an ally in his denial. "Bianca, look, it is just a look-alike, right? I mean, there are 7 billion people in the world. Everyone has a doppelganger, and the name Halston is a common name. It is not that rare. It is a coincidence." "A coincidence?" Bianca echoed. Her voice was thin and high, barely audible. She was staring at the screen with a look of pure, unadulterated horror. She was not looking at the face. She was looking at the suit. "That suit," she whispered. "That is an Armani Privé custom. That is—" She looked at me, her eyes wide. "Phoebe?" "Mark says it is a coincidence," I said. My voice was calm, steady, and loud enough to fill the silence. "Mark thinks it is a statistical anomaly. A woman with my name, my face, my scar, and my educational background just happens to be on the news at the exact moment you are telling me to get a job as a receptionist." Mark spun around to face me. "Stop it," he snapped. "Stop playing games. This is not funny. Did you hack the TV? Is this some kind of prank? Did you pay someone to make a fake video?" "A fake video on CNN?" I asked, arching an eyebrow. "On a live broadcast that is currently playing in every airport, hotel lobby, and living room in America? That would be an impressive hack. Mark, maybe even more impressive than building a quantum energy grid." "Then what is it?" he shouted, his panic rising. "Explain it. Because it cannot be you. You are you." He gestured at me, at my old sweater, at my lack of jewelry, at the general aura of poverty I had carefully curated. "You drive a 10-year-old Honda," he yelled. "You live in a rent-controlled apartment. You wear clothes from 5 years ago. Billionaires do not do that. Billionaires buy islands. They do not come to Thanksgiving dinner and eat dry turkey and listen to us lecture them." "Do they not?" I asked. I held my wine glass by the stem. I swirled the cheap liquid one last time. Then, with deliberate, cinematic slowness, I placed the glass down on the table. Click. The sound was soft, but in the dead silence of the room, it carried the weight of a judge's gavel slamming down to deliver a verdict. It was the sound of a period being placed at the end of a sentence. It was the sound of a door locking. "Maybe," I said, looking at my father, whose hands were now shaking so hard they were vibrating against the tablecloth. "Maybe you do not know what billionaires do, because you have never met one. Until tonight." My mother let out a whimper and covered her mouth with both hands. On the television. The interview continued. The Anderson Cooper on the screen leaned forward. "Ms. Halston," the TV anchor said, "you have been called the most important inventor since Tesla. You have solved the energy crisis. Why the secrecy? Why hide for 5 years?" The camera cut to the Phoebe on the screen. She leaned back, confident, powerful. "Because," the TV Phoebe said, her voice synchronized with the reality of the room, "I needed to work without noise. I needed to build without the distraction of people telling me what was impossible." In the dining room, the real Phoebe leaned back in her chair, mirroring the woman on the screen. "And," I added, speaking to the room, not the TV, "I wanted to see who would stick by me when I had nothing. I wanted to see who loved me, and who only loved my potential." I looked at the envelope of cash still sitting in the center of the table. "I have my answer," I said. The silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with the sound of bridges burning, collapsing into the river of their regret. My father looked at the envelope, then at me, then at the TV. The realization washed over him, not as a wave of joy, but as a tsunami of shame. He realized that the daughter he had threatened to disown was the most powerful person he would ever meet, and he realized, with a crushing clarity, that he had just lost her. The television screen did not offer them a moment of reprieve. It did not cut to a commercial break for pharmaceutical drugs or luxury cars, giving them a chance to breathe or formulate a denial. Instead, the broadcast shifted gears, moving from the shock of the reveal to the crushing weight of the details. The camera cut to a reporter standing in front of a manufacturing facility that looked less like a factory and more like a fortress. "I am standing outside the Ethos Dynamics production hub in Nevada," the reporter shouted over the wind. "This facility has been operating under the guise of a data storage center for the past 4 years, but inside, machines designed by Phoebe Halston herself have been manufacturing the impossible." The screen split. On one side was the live feed of the reporter. On the other was a graphic that looked like a dossier. "Phoebe Halston," the voiceover read with clinical precision. "Former valedictorian of Caltech, recruited by NASA at 22, resigned 5 years ago. Since then, she has filed over 200 patents under various shell companies, all of which converge under the Ethos umbrella." Then came the numbers. They were not just figures, they were weapons. Unlike most tech founders who dilute their ownership through rounds of venture capital funding, the financial correspondent explained, reappearing on screen with a chart that looked like a pie with only one slice missing. Halston retained absolute control. She refused outside investment. She refused board oversight. She funded the initial research with her own savings and early crypto investments, then leveraged intellectual property licensing to fund the rest. The chart zoomed in. "Current ownership structure of Ethos Dynamics," the correspondent said. "Phoebe Halston owns 85% of the company." A collective gasp sucked the oxygen out of the room. 85% of a $300 billion contract. Based on the valuation of the government contracts signed last week and the projected market cap, the reporter continued, his voice trembling slightly at the magnitude of the math. Forbes and Bloomberg have instantaneously updated their real-time billionaire indices. A new graphic appeared. It was a bar chart. It showed the net worth of famous tech moguls, and at the top, a new bar shot across the screen, turning gold. "As of the market opening tomorrow," the reporter announced, "Phoebe Halston's estimated net worth will stand at $42 billion. The number hung on the screen. $42 billion. "42, Bianca whispered. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was high and thin, like a wire being pulled until it snapped. Billion? With a B? She turned to look at me. Her eyes were wide, the pupils dilated in a fight-or-flight response. She looked at me not as her sister, but as a mythical creature that had suddenly materialized in her dining room. She looked at me as if I were a dragon sitting on a hoard of gold that she could not even comprehend. 42 billion, she repeated, the words tumbling out of her mouth without permission. That is not real money. That is a GDP. That is the budget of a country. It is liquidity and assets combined, I clarified, my voice cutting through her panic like a scalpel. Though the valuation is conservative, it does not account for the civilian sector applications we are rolling out in Q3. My father sat paralyzed. His face was a mask of gray ash. His eyes slowly traveled down from the television screen, down past the centerpiece, until they landed on the white envelope sitting in the middle of the table. The envelope contained $2,000. The contrast was so violent it was almost physical. $2,000. It was a rounding error. It was less than the interest my accounts generated in the time it took him to blink. He stared at that envelope as if it were a radioactive isotope. He realized, with a dawning horror, that he had tried to feed a whale a single crumb of bread and called it charity. He had tried to save someone who could buy and sell his entire existence 1,000 times over before breakfast. He reached out a shaking hand and covered the envelope, trying to hide it, trying to make it disappear. But the gesture only drew more attention to it. The pathetic inadequacy of his rescue was now the centerpiece of the table. 42 billion, Mark murmured. He was doing mental math, his brain whirring. That puts you in the top 20 wealthiest people on the planet, maybe top 10 depending on the market fluctuation. He looked at me with a hunger that was terrifying. It was not familial love. It was the look of a man who suddenly realizes he is sitting next to a gold mine. But wait, the anchor on the TV said. There is more. The secrecy of the Helios project was a matter of national security. The footage changed again. This time, it was not a studio shot or a factory tour. It was grainy footage, clearly taken by an official press pool but embargoed until this moment. The setting was the Oval Office. My mother let out a small, strangled squeak. On the screen, the President of the United States stood behind the resolute desk. Standing next to him, shaking his hand, was me. I was wearing the same charcoal suit from the interview photo. The President was smiling, holding up a leather-bound folder. I looked bored. I looked like I wanted to be anywhere else. This footage was taken last Tuesday, the reporter narrated, at a closed-door ceremony where the executive order was signed, granting Atheros Dynamics unprecedented access to the national grid infrastructure. Mark's head snapped toward me so fast, I heard his neck crack. Tuesday? He demanded. His voice was accusatory, but underneath it was a layer of awe. Last Tuesday? You said you could not come to movie night because you were busy. I was busy, I said, picking up a fork and examining the tines. You said, Mark continued, his voice rising in hysteria, and I quote, I have to debug some code. You told us you were debugging code. I was, I replied calmly. There was a latency issue in the Southern Interchange algorithm. I fixed it on the flight back. You blew off the Avengers movie night to meet the president? Bianca shrieked. And you did not tell us? The meeting was classified. Bianca, I said, my tone bordering on boredom. And frankly, it was not that interesting. Politicians love ceremony. They love to sign things with fancy pens. The meeting only took 30 minutes. The rest of the time I spent in the waiting room working on my laptop. So yes, I was debugging code. I do not lie. You met the president, my mother whispered. Tears began to stream down her face. They were not tears of joy. A mother knows the difference. Tears of joy are light. They shimmer. These were heavy, ugly tears. They were tears of fear. She was looking at me and realizing that she did not know me. She had spent the last 5 years criticizing a stranger. She had spent the last 2 hours insulting the most powerful woman in the room. perhaps the most powerful woman in the country. She looked at the coupon for 50 cents off laundry detergent that was peeking out from under my father's hand. She realized that while she was clipping that coupon to help me, I was negotiating treaties. The humiliation was total. It washed over her, drowning her in the realization of her own smallness. "I asked you if you had enough money for gas." My mother sobbed. "I asked you if you were eating properly, and you were doing this. I told you I was fine," I said. "You chose not to believe me. You chose to believe your own narrative because it made you feel superior. You needed me to be the failure so you could feel like the successful matriarch. That is not fair," she cried. But the fight had gone out of her. The television continued its assault. The news anchor turned to a panel of experts. "Joining us now is Dr. Eris Thorne, Nobel laureate in physics," the anchor said. "Dr. Thorne, is this technology real? Can a single company really solve the energy crisis?" Dr. Thorne, a man with wild white hair and a reputation for being a harsh critic, nodded solemnly on the screen. "It is not just real," Dr. Thorne said. "It is elegant. I have reviewed the white papers Halston released 10 minutes ago. The mathematics are breathtaking. She has not just improved the battery, she has fundamentally altered our understanding of electron retention. This is not an evolution. It is a new species of physics. What Phoebe Halston has done is equivalent to the discovery of fire." "The discovery of fire," the anchor repeated. My father slowly pulled his hand back from the envelope. He looked at his own hands. They were the hands of a man who had worked in middle management for 40 years, who had played it safe, who had followed the rules, and he realized that the rules no longer applied. "Fire," he whispered. He looked at me. "You are a physicist?" "I am an engineer." "Dad," I corrected him. "Physicists dream, engineers build." "But why?" Bianca asked, her voice trembling. "Why did you let us treat you like dirt? If you had this, if you were this, why did you sit there and let us mock you? Why did you take the insults? You could have shut us up at any moment. You could have bought this house and evicted us. You are a monster." "A monster?" I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Because I did not brag? Because I did not wave my bank statement in your face? I let you treat me like dirt because that is how you wanted to treat me. I gave you a blank canvas. I gave you a Phoebe with nothing, and you showed me exactly how you treat people who have nothing." "That was a trap," Mark accused, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You entrapped us." "It was a test," I said, "and you all failed, spectacularly." On the screen, a financial analyst was now speaking. "The market impact will be catastrophic for traditional energy sectors. Oil, coal, natural gas are done. If you are holding stocks in those industries, get out now. Etherius is the future, and Phoebe Halston is the gatekeeper." Mark let out a low moan. "My portfolio," he whimpered. "I am heavy in oil. I have everything in oil." "I know," I said. "I tried to tell you 3 years ago to diversify into renewables. You told me I was a hippie and that real men invest in drilling." Mark put his head in his hands. "The stock market opens in 12 hours, I said, checking my watch, a cheap Casio that I wore specifically to annoy them. "You might want to put in some sell orders, although the pre-market trading has probably already wiped out about 30% of your value." "You knew," Mark whispered, looking up with red-rimmed eyes. "You sat there and let me brag about my bonus. You let me talk about the summer house, and you knew you were about to bankrupt me." "I did not bankrupt you, Mark," I said. "Progress bankrupted you. I just happened to be the one driving the train." "We are family," my mother wailed. "How could you be so cold?" "Cold?" I asked. I stood up. The movement was sudden, and they all flinched. I walked over to the television. I stood next to the screen, next to the image of myself shaking hands with the president. The contrast was stark. The Phoebe in the room was dressed in rags, but her posture was identical to the Titan on the screen. "Cold is knowing your daughter is struggling, or thinking she is, and offering her clothes that you deemed too ugly to wear yourself," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. Cold is threatening to cut off your child at Christmas because her job title does not impress your neighbors. Cold is judging human worth by a paycheck. I looked at the graphic of the $42 billion. This number? I pointed to it. This is just a number. It means I have resources. It means I have leverage. But it does not make me better than you. And the fact that you think it does that is the tragedy. My father looked down at his plate. He could not meet my eyes. He was a small man in a large chair, shrinking under the weight of the truth. The experts are calling it the Halston era, the TV anchor said. Turn it off, my father whispered. No, I said. Leave it on. I think the weather report is coming up. You will want to know if it is going to rain on your parade. I walked back to the table and picked up the envelope. I held it in my hand, weighing it. $2,000, I said. I looked at my mother. You know, the consultation fee for my time is currently $50,000 an hour, I said. I have been here for 3 hours, by my calculations. You owe me about $148,000, but do not worry. I tossed the envelope back onto the table. It slid across the wood and hit the gravy boat. I will waive the fee. Consider it my Thanksgiving contribution. The room was silent, save for the voice on the television, continuing to list the accolades of the daughter they never knew. The brutal truth had been delivered, not with a shout, but with a number, and the number was 42 billion. The television screen shifted again, the graphics dissolving from the staggering financial charts to a split-screen interview. On the left remained Anderson Cooper, the anchor of reality. On the right sat a man whose face was etched into the bedrock of the American economy. It was Richard Sterling, the former CEO of Apex Energy, the conglomerate that had dominated the global oil and gas market for the better part of a century. He was a man my father had worshipped for decades, a titan whose biography sat on our bookshelf in the living room, spine unbroken but revered. Sterling looked older than he did on the book jacket. He looked tired. He looked like a king who had just surrendered his sword. "Richard," Anderson said, his voice respectful but probing, "you were the head of the largest energy company in the world until your retirement last month. Did you know about Aetherius? Did you know about Halston?" Sterling let out a dry, resigned chuckle. It was the sound of a man who had lost a game he did not even know he was playing. "Did I know?" Sterling said, leaning into the microphone. "Anderson, I spent the last 3 years trying to destroy her. Or more accurately, I spent the last 3 years trying to buy her so I wouldn't have to destroy myself." The room went still. My father leaned forward, his mouth slightly ajar. His hero was speaking, and he was speaking about the daughter sitting at the end of the table. "We knew she had something," Sterling continued. "Our intelligence suggested she had cracked the code on solid-state retention. We didn't know the scale, but we knew it was dangerous to our business model. So, I did what we always do. I tried to acquire the threat." "You made an offer?" Anderson asked. "I made 10 offers," Sterling corrected. 10, over the course of 18 months. We started at $500 million, a generous offer for a startup with no revenue. She didn't even respond to the email. Bianca made a small, choking sound. 500 million. "So we kept going up," Sterling narrated, his eyes looking past the camera, lost in the memory of his defeat. 1 billion, 5 billion, 20 billion. We offered her autonomy. We offered her the chairmanship of our research division. We offered to put her name on the building. And? Silence, Sterling said. Absolute radio silence. It was infuriating. I have negotiated with heads of state. Anderson, I have never been ignored like that. It was as if we were ants trying to negotiate with a boot. "So what happened with the final offer?" Anderson pressed. "I flew to Palo Alto personally," Sterling said. "I walked into her office. It was sparsely furnished, just a desk and a whiteboard covered in equations I couldn't understand. I sat down and I slid a contract across the desk. It was an all-cash offer, $40 billion. The air in the dining room vanished. $40 billion, Sterling repeated, emphasizing every syllable. Cash, no stock options. No vesting period, just a wire transfer that would have made her the richest self-made woman in history overnight. I told her she could take the money, retire to an island, and never work another day in her life. My family turned to me. The movement was synchronized, like a school of fish changing direction. Their necks craned, their eyes wide with a mixture of horror and disbelief. "You refused $40 billion?" Mark whispered. His voice was trembling. He looked physically ill. To Mark, money was the scorecard of life. To refuse money was to cheat the game. It was heresy. "$40 billion?" my mother stammered. She looked at the $2,000 on the table. The comparison was no longer just embarrassing. It was grotesque. "Phoebe, is that true? You said no to $40 billion?" "I did," I said, my voice calm, slicing through their hysteria. "Why?" Bianca shrieked. It was a primal scream of frustration. "Why would you do that? You could have bought everything. You could have bought Italy." "Because I did not want to sell," I said simply. On the screen, Sterling answered the question for me. "She looked at the check," Sterling said, shaking his head in disbelief. "She didn't even pick it up. She just looked at it, then looked at me, and said, 'Mr. Sterling, you are trying to buy a forest because you want to chop it down for lumber. I am growing a forest because I want to breathe.' And then she asked me to leave because she had a conference call with the European Union. She kicked Richard Sterling out of her office," my father whispered. He looked at me with a new expression. It was fear, pure, unadulterated fear. He realized that the authority he thought he held over me, the authority of a father, of a man, of a breadwinner, was a complete illusion. I had dismissed men 10 times more powerful than him without blinking. "That was the moment I knew we were finished," Sterling concluded on screen. "You cannot buy someone who does not care about money, and Phoebe Halston does not care about money. She cares about the mission, God help the oil industry, because she has arrived." "Speaking of her mission," Anderson Cooper said, pivoting the segment. "We dug into the archives and found this rare clip. It is from a closed-door climate summit in Geneva 2 years ago. This is the only public footage of Halston speaking about her philosophy." The screen flickered. The image changed. It was a handheld camera shot, slightly shaky, but the audio was clear. I was standing at a podium. The room was dark, but the spotlight was on me. I was wearing a black turtleneck, looking very much like the archetype of a tech visionary, but without the ego. "The question is not about return on investment," the Phoebe on the screen said. Her voice was passionate, resonant, filling the dining room with a charisma I had never shown my family. "Wall Street wants to know when we will IPO. They want to know when they can extract value, but I am not here to extract value. I am here to ensure that 30 years from now, our children do not have to wear gas masks to walk to school." The camera zoomed in on my face on the screen. "My shareholders are not the people in this room," the screen Phoebe continued. "My shareholders are the unborn, and I will not sell their future for a quarterly earnings boost. If that means I have to burn $40 billion to keep the lights on, pass me the matches." The clip ended. Mark slumped back in his chair. He looked defeated. He was a man who lived for the quarterly earnings boost. He was the person I was railing against in that speech. He realized, in that moment, that the distance between us was not just financial, it was moral, it was intellectual. I was playing a game where the currency was survival, and he was playing a game where the currency was a new Porsche. "You are not just rich," Mark whispered, staring at his hands. "You are important. I am necessary," I corrected him. Bianca pulled out her phone. She had been vibrating with the need to check social media since the broadcast started. And now she could not stop herself. "Oh my God," she gasped. "What is it?" my mother asked, terrified of more bad news. "Twitter," Bianca said, scrolling frantically. "It is trending. Phoebe Halston is the #1 trend in the world. Look at this." She turned the phone around. A cascade of tweets flowed down the screen like a waterfall. Phoebe Halston just saved the planet. Who is she? The woman turned down $40 billion. Queen behavior. Etherisk Dynamics is the future. Goodbye, Exxon. I want to work for her. I want to be her. LinkedIn is crashing, Bianca said. Switching apps, her voice rising in pitch. My feed, everyone is talking about it. The HR director at my company just posted about you. He called you the visionary of the century. She looked at me, her eyes wide. My boss is posting about you. He says he wishes he could get an interview with Etherisk. Then, the sounds began. It started with a single buzz. My father's phone, sitting on the sideboard. Then Bianca's phone, lying on the table. Then Mark's phone, on the floor where he had dropped it. Then my mother's phone in her purse. Bzzzt, bzzzt, bzzzt. It was a chorus of vibration, a mechanical swarm of locusts descending on the dining room. Bianca picked up her phone. It is my college roommate. She says, "Is that your sister? The one you said was unemployed?" Bianca's face flushed a deep, beet red. She quickly swiped the notification away. I have 17 text messages, Mark said, staring at his cracked screen. The guys from the trading floor. They are asking if I have inside info. They are asking if I can get them a meeting. They are asking. He swallowed hard. They are asking if you are single. My mother reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. It is Aunt Martha, she whispered. And Cousin Sarah. And oh, Lord, Mrs. Gable next door. She says she just saw the news. She asks if we are celebrating. She says she always knew Phoebe was special. She thought I was the cleaning lady yesterday, I reminded her. She says she wants to bring over a pie, my mother mumbled, reading the text. She says she is so proud to live next to the Halston family. The hypocrisy was suffocating. It was a physical weight in the room. The outside world was flooding in, validating me, crowning me, worshiping me. And every text message, every tweet, every notification was a mirror reflecting my family's own blindness back at them. They did not need to ask me if it was true anymore. The world was telling them it was true. The world was screaming it. My father walked over to the sideboard and picked up his phone. He stared at the screen for a long time. The color in his face shifted from gray to a flushed, painful pink. Who is it, Robert? My mother asked, fearing the answer. It is Mr. Henderson, my father said. Henderson was his former boss, the CEO of the regional bank where my father had spent 30 years climbing to middle management. Henderson was a man my father feared and respected above all others, a man whose approval my father had craved for decades. What does he say? I asked, taking a sip of water. My father cleared his throat. His voice was raspy. He read the text aloud, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Robert, just saw CNN. Incredible. Your girl just saved my entire retirement portfolio with that energy announcement. The market futures are skyrocketing. I always knew you raised them right. Congratulations to the father of the year. Let's play golf next week. My treat. Father of the year. The irony hung in the air. Thick and toxic. He had just spent the last 2 hours telling me I was a disappointment. He had threatened to disown me. He had called me a bum. And now, the man he admired most was congratulating him for raising a savior. He looked at the text. Then he looked at me. He realized that he would have to accept the congratulations. He would have to go to that golf game and smile and nod and pretend that he had supported me all along. He would have to live a lie, because the truth, that he had tried to crush the very thing that was now saving him, was too shameful to admit. He lowered the phone slowly. He wants to play golf, my father whispered. He hasn't spoken to me in 3 years. You should go, I said coldly. You can tell him all about how you motivated me with coupons. Phoebe, he said, his voice cracking. Don't, I said. Do not try to rewrite history just because the audience has changed. You know what happened in this room tonight? I know what happened. The fact that the rest of the world thinks you are a hero is a burden you will have to carry. It is called imposter syndrome. Dad, get used to it. Mark looked up from his phone. Goldman Sachs just issued a buy rating on anything connected to Ethereum. They are calling it the gold rush of the millennium. He looked at me with a desperate, pathetic hope. Phoebe, seriously, the portfolio. Is there anything I can do? You can watch, I said. That is what you are good at, right? Watching from the sidelines while the people you think are failures change the world. The phones continued to buzz. Bzzz, bzzz, bzzz. A relentless applause from a world that was celebrating my victory. Providing the soundtrack to my family's absolute defeat, there was no denial left. There was no ambiguity. There was only the harsh, blinding light of the truth, and they were squinting against the glare. The atmosphere in the room did not just shift, it inverted. Gravity seemed to change direction. For the past 2 hours, the power dynamic had been a steep vertical slope, with my family perched high on the summit of their perceived success, looking down at me in the valley of my supposed failure. But in the span of a single news segment, the mountain had crumbled. They were now the ones in the pit, looking up, and the altitude sickness was making them dizzy. The physical transformation of the people around the table was almost biological. Bianca, who had spent the evening expanding her presence, flinging her hair, using broad gestures, taking up space, seemed to physically shrink. Her shoulders hunched inward, her spine collapsed, and she pulled her elbows close to her ribs as if trying to present a smaller target. The arrogant gleam in her eyes was replaced by a darting, fearful uncertainty. She looked like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for the parent to find the shards. Mark, the alpha male of the hedge fund world, was sweating. It was a cold, oily sheen that appeared on his forehead and upper lip. He loosened his tie, a subconscious gesture of surrender, as if the silk noose of his own pretension was suddenly too tight. My father sat heavily in his chair. No longer the patriarch, but an old man. The lines on his face seemed to deepen under the harsh light of the chandelier. He looked at me, then at the television, then at his hands, trying to piece together a reality where his authority still meant something. Bianca was the first to try to salvage the narrative. She cleared her throat, a small, pathetic sound compared to her earlier booming laughter. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why did you not say anything, Phoebe? You let us think you were a failure. You sat there and let us worry about you. That is cruel. That is gaslighting." I turned my head slowly to look at her. I did not blink. "I did not say anything?" I repeated, my voice calm and level. "Bianca, rewind the tape of this evening. Rewind the tape of the last 5 years. I told you exactly what I was doing. Every single time you asked, I gave you the answer." "You said you were consulting," she protested, though her voice lacked any real heat. "I said I was building a new energy infrastructure," I corrected her. "I told you at Christmas 2 years ago that I was working on solid-state ion transport. Do you remember what you said?" Bianca looked down at her plate. "You said," I continued, pitching my voice to mimic her condescending tone perfectly. "Oh, Phoebe, stop with the technobabble. Nobody cares about your science fair projects. Pass the wine. You called it a science fair project. Bianca, you infantilized a technology that just rendered the internal combustion engine obsolete." "I did not know," she whispered. "You did not want to know." I said, "There is a difference. When I told you I was busy, you heard unemployed. When I told you I was solving a problem, you heard struggling. You filtered every word I said through the lens of your own superiority. You needed me to be small so you could feel big." "But the clothes," she stammered, gesturing vaguely at my sweater. "You dress like—" "I dress like someone who does not need to impress middle management," I said. "I dress for efficiency. You dress for approval. That is why you cannot understand me." My mother made a small, weeping sound. She reached out a hand toward me, but stopped short of touching my sleeve, as if she were afraid I might burn her. Phoebe, honey, she quavered. I just wanted what was best for you. You have to believe that. A mother worries. When I saw you living like that alone, with no husband, no steady paycheck, I thought you were lost. I thought I had failed you. Her eyes darted to the white envelope still sitting on the table near the gravy boat. The envelope with the $2,000 and the coupons. It looked like a dirty rag now. I was only trying to help, she sobbed. That money was a sacrifice for us. We just wanted to make sure you were safe. I reached out and picked up the envelope. The paper felt crisp and cheap between my fingers. I looked at it for a long moment, letting the silence stretch until it was painful. Then, with a deliberate, slow movement, I tore the corner of the envelope. The sound was shockingly loud in the quiet room. I placed the torn envelope back on the table. I believe you, Mom, I said, my voice devoid of warmth. I believe you thought you were helping, but help that comes with humiliation is not help. It is control. You did not give me this money to lift me up. You gave it to me to remind me of my place. You wanted to be the savior, which required me to be the victim. No, she wept. No, that is not true. It is true, I said. And as for this money? I pushed the envelope toward her. Keep it. You are going to need it. What do you mean? She asked, wiping her eyes. I mean, I said, gesturing toward the front window where the flashing lights of the press vans were starting to multiply. That within an hour, there will be 50 reporters on your lawn. They will trample your prize-winning azaleas. They will dig through your trash looking for dirt on me. And when they finally leave, you are going to need a very expensive professional cleaning crew to scrub the mud and the shame off your driveway. Use the $2,000 for that. My father straightened his spine. He could not accept this. He could not accept being spoken to like a subordinate in his own house. He summoned the last dregs of his patriarchal entitlement. Phoebe, he boomed, though his voice cracked on the first syllable. That is enough. You may be a CEO. You may be a billionaire. But in this house, you are my daughter, and you have been dishonest. Hiding your success from your own flesh and blood is disrespectful. It shows a lack of character. I laughed. It was a sharp, jagged sound that cut him off mid-sentence. Respect? I asked, leaning forward. You want to talk to me about respect? Dad, look at your watch. 15 minutes ago. Literally 15 minutes. You looked me in the eye and threatened to cut me out of this family. You gave me an ultimatum. You said if I did not have a real job by Christmas, I was dead to you. He opened his mouth to speak, but I did not let him. You called me a bum, I reminded him. You called me delusional. You sat there and told me that my life was a waste. And now, because you found out I have a bank account with 9 zeros, suddenly you want to talk about respect? You do not want respect. Dad, you want access. That is not fair, he sputtered, his face turning red. I was trying to motivate you. It was tough love. It was emotional blackmail, I said. If I had actually been a struggling artist, if I had actually been poor, would you have respected me then? No. You would have thrown me out in the snow on Christmas Day. Your love was conditional on my success, but you were too blind to see the success when it was sitting right in front of you. I turned to Mark. He was trying to make himself invisible, staring intently at his wineglass. And you? I said softly. Mark jumped. He looked up. A forced, terrified smile plastered on his face. Hey, Phoebe, he said, his voice rising an octave. Look, let us not get crazy here. It was a misunderstanding. We are all stressed. The economy, you know? It makes people say things. He leaned in, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. But seriously, this etherisk thing is incredible. I mean, genius. I always said you were the smart one. Always. You called me Captain Planet 20 minutes ago, I said. Just a joke. Mark laughed nervously. Friendly banter? Siblings, right? But listen, about the portfolio, I am heavy in Exxon and Chevron. If this news is as big as they say, I am looking at a total wipeout. You know the market better than anyone right now. What should I do? Should I hold? Should I short? Give me a hint. For the family. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had mocked my car, my clothes, and my life. Do you remember my birthday 3 years ago? I asked. Mark blinked. What? My 29th birthday, I said. I came to your apartment in the city. I asked you for advice on how to structure a patent holding company. I trusted you because you were in finance. I remember you coming over, Mark said, sweating profusely now. Do you remember what you told me? I asked. He swallowed hard. He remembered. I could see it in his eyes. You told me, I recited, that I should stop playing pretend business. You told me that if I really wanted to understand how money works, I should get a job as a cashier at a supermarket. You said, scanning barcodes will teach you more about cash flow than your little imaginary inventions ever will. The room went deadly silent. So, I said, leaning back in my chair, I think that is excellent advice. Mark, you should take it. When your portfolio crashes tomorrow morning, and it will crash. Mark, it will go to zero. You should go get a job as a cashier. It will teach you a lot about cash flow. Mark looked as if I had just punched him in the stomach. He slumped back, defeated. The realization of his financial ruin settling in alongside the realization that I would not lift a finger to save him. You are vindictive, Bianca whispered. You are enjoying this. I am not enjoying it, I said, standing up and walking around the table. I am clarifying the record. You spent 5 years writing a story about me. You wrote me as the loser, the charity case, the disappointment, and now that you realized you were reading the book upside down, you are angry at the author. I stopped behind my mother's chair. She stiffened. Do you remember the Thanksgiving of 2022? I asked. I brought a prototype of the battery cell to show you. It was the size of a matchbox. I was so proud. I tried to explain how it worked. My mother nodded slowly, tears dripping onto her pearls. You told me to put it away because it was dirty and industrial, I said. You said, Phoebe, we are trying to have a nice dinner. Put your toys away. You called my life's work a toy. I walked to my father. And you, I said, when I quit NASA, you told everyone I was fired. You lied to your friends. You lied to the neighbors. You could not accept that I would walk away from prestige to pursue a dream. So you invented a failure to explain it. You made me a liar in my own hometown to protect your ego. I was protecting your reputation, he argued weakly. No, I said. You were protecting yours. You were ashamed of a daughter who took risks. You wanted a daughter who took orders. I walked back to the head of the table. Standing opposite my father, I placed my hands on the back of my chair. So let us be clear, I said, my voice ringing with the finality of a closing argument. I did not hide from you. I stood in plain sight. I told you the truth every single day. You just refused to hear it because the truth did not fit the little box you wanted to keep me in. You wanted a servant? You wanted a punching bag? You wanted a cautionary tale to make yourselves feel better about your own mediocre choices? I looked at each of them in turn. Well, I said, I am sorry to disappoint you, but I am none of those things. And now, you have to live with the fact that the person you treated like garbage is the person the rest of the world is calling a savior. And you have to live with the fact that I know exactly who you are. I picked up my purse. It was a cheap, canvas tote bag. Inside was a phone that contained the direct line to the White House. You can keep the food, I said. I seemed to have lost my appetite. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a ruin. They sat there, amidst the wreckage of their own arrogance, watching me. They wanted to speak, to apologize, to beg, to scream, but they couldn't, because for the first time in their lives, they realized that they were not the main characters of this story. They were just the villains in the prologue of mine. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the hardwood floor. A harsh, guttural sound that seemed to signal the end of the dinner, the end of the evening, and the end of this family as we knew it. I stood up. I did not rush. I unfolded my legs, straightened my spine, and smoothed the front of my cashmere sweater, the same sweater they had sneered at an hour ago, which now, in their eyes, probably looked like the robe of a prophet. I looked down at them. For 32 years, I had felt small in this room. I had felt like a guest in my own history, a footnote in the grand biography of the Halston family success story. But as I stood there, looking at the tops of their heads, seeing the thinning hair on my father's crown and the dark roots beginning to show in Bianca's blowout, I realized that I was not small. I had just been crouching so they would not feel threatened by my shadow. "You asked me why," I said. My voice was not loud, but it filled the room, absorbing the silence. "You asked why I did not tell you. You think I did it to trick you. You think I sat on this information for 5 years just to spring a trap on a random Thanksgiving." I walked slowly around the table, my footsteps silent on the Persian rug. "But I did not hide the truth because I wanted to play a game," I said. "I hid it because I know you. I know you better than you know yourselves. I ran the simulations in my head 1,000 times. I calculated the variables of your reactions, and the result was always the same." I stopped behind Bianca. She flinched, her shoulders drawing up toward her ears as if she expected a physical blow. She was staring at her hands, her knuckles white. "If I had told you," I said, speaking to the back of her head, "if I had come home 3 years ago and said, 'Bianca, I just made my first billion,' do you know what would have happened?" She did not answer. She could not. "You would not have been happy for me," I said, dissecting her character with the cold precision of a surgeon. "You would have been destroyed. Your entire identity, Bianca, is built on the fragile premise that you are the successful one. You are the pretty one. You are the one who made it. If I am up here," I raised my hand high, "and you are down there, your world collapses. You would have hated me. You would have let jealousy eat you alive until it rotted every conversation we ever had." "That is not true," she whispered, but it was a weak, hollow defense. "Or," I continued, "you would have gone the other way. You would have become a parasite. You would have looked at my bank account and seen it as your own personal ATM. You would have asked for loans you never intended to pay. You would have pitched me terrible business ideas for boutique hotels or fashion lines. And when I said no, because I would have said no, you would have called me stingy. You would have told everyone that your billionaire sister was letting you starve." I walked past her. "I spared us that. Bianca," I said. "I let you keep your crown. I let you be the successful one so you could sleep at night. I let you pity me because pity is the only way you know how to relate to me without feeling inferior." I turned my gaze to my parents. They were sitting side by side, looking like 2 statues eroding in the rain. My father was staring at the tablecloth as if the pattern contained the secrets of the universe. My mother was clutching a napkin to her chest, her eyes red and swollen. "And you?" I said. "Mom, Dad." My father flinched at the sound of his title. "If I had told you," I said, "if I had driven up here in a Ferrari 2 years ago and told you I owned the future of energy, do you know what you would have done?" "We would have been proud," my mother sobbed. "We would have been so proud." "No," I shook my head. "You would have been loud." I leaned against the sideboard, crossing my arms. "You would have taken my success, and you would have stripped it for parts," I said. "You would have gone to the country club and bragged to everyone who would listen. You would have used my name to get better tables at restaurants. You would have used my net worth to settle scores with old rivals." I looked at my father. "You would have walked into your old bank," I said to him, "and you would have rubbed it in Henderson's face, not because you were proud of the work I did, not because you understood the science or the sacrifice, but because it made you look good. You would have worn my achievements like a medal you did not earn. That is what parents do," my father argued, his voice raspy and weak. We take pride in our children. There is a difference between pride and possession, I countered. You do not want to celebrate me. You want to own me. You want to point at the TV and say, I made that, but you did not make this, Dad. I gestured to myself. You made the girl who was afraid to speak at the dinner table, I said. You made the girl who thought her worth was tied to a salary. I made the CEO. I made her in spite of you, not because of you. That is cruel, he whispered. We gave you everything. You gave me a roof and food, I said, and I am grateful for that. But you also gave me a condition. You taught me that love is a transaction. You taught me that if I am not performing, I am not valuable. Well, guess what? I am performing now. I am performing on the biggest stage in the world. And you know what the tragedy is? I paused, letting the words hang in the air. The tragedy is that you do not love Phoebe the billionaire any more than you loved Phoebe the unemployed freelancer. You just love the access. You love the power. You love the reflection of yourself in the gold plating. We love you, my mother wailed, the sound piercing the room. We love you, Phoebe. How can you say that? Because I listened to you for 2 hours, I said. I sat here and I listened to you tear me apart. You did not know I was rich then. That was the raw data. That was the control group. When you thought I was nothing, you treated me like nothing. Now that you know I am something, you want to rewrite the data. But the experiment is over. Mom, the results are in. My father let out a long, shuddering sigh. He slumped forward, resting his forehead in his hands. It was the posture of a man who had been stripped of his armor. He knew I was right. He was a man of business, a man of numbers, and he knew that you could not argue with the audit. The audit of his parenting had just come back, and he was bankrupt. We just wanted you to be secure, my mother pleaded, her voice dropping to a whimper. We were scared for you. All those questions were just worries. It was just anxiety. Worry? I asked. I walked over to the table and picked up the coupon for the 50-cent discount on laundry detergent. I held it up. You call this worry? I asked. Giving your 32-year-old daughter coupons in front of her successful sister? That is not worry. Mom, that is performance art. That is humiliation. I dropped the coupon. It fluttered to the floor, landing near my father's polished shoe. Worry looks like a phone call asking how I am feeling, I said. Worry looks like asking if I am happy, not if I am employed. Worry implies you care about my internal state. You only cared about my external optics. You did not care if I was happy. You cared if I was presentable. Phoebe, please, she begged, reaching out to grab the hem of my sweater. Please stop. You are hurting us. I am hurting you? I asked, stepping back out of her reach. I am just holding up a mirror. If you do not like what you see, do not blame the glass. My mother dissolved into fresh tears, burying her face in her napkin. It was a mournful, keening sound, the sound of a woman mourning the loss of a fantasy. She was mourning the daughter she thought she could control, the narrative she thought she was writing. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by my mother's sobs and the low hum of the television, where the news cycle was still churning out my name, Halston, Halston, Halston. The name echoed in the room, alien and familiar all at once. Then, a sound cut through the emotional fog. Ring, ring. It was not the buzzing of a text message. It was the distinct, sharp trill of my encrypted satellite phone. It was coming from my tote bag on the floor. The sound was jarring. It belonged to a different world. My world. I bent down and picked up the bag. I pulled out the phone. It was a sleek, black device with no brand markings. I looked at the caller ID. Security Chief. Alpha Team. I pressed the answer button and held the phone to my ear. My voice shifted instantly. The emotion vanished, replaced by the crisp, commanding tone of the CEO. Status, I said. My family looked up. They watched the transformation in real time. They saw the daughter disappear and the Titan take her place. "Ms. Halston," the voice on the other end crackled, clear and urgent. "We are 2 minutes out. The press has breached the perimeter of the neighborhood. We have identified 6 vans and a news helicopter inbound from the south. The local police are overwhelmed." "Protocol?" I asked. "We are initiating a standard extraction," the chief said. "We have 3 SUVs. We are going to block the driveway to create a corridor. Do not, I repeat, do not exit the front door until we have eyes on you." "Understood," I said. "Is the airspace clear?" "We have a no-fly zone temporarily authorized over the property for the next 20 minutes, the chief replied. "Courtesy of your friends in D.C. "Good," I said. "I am ready." I hung up the phone and slipped it into my pocket. I looked at my family. They were staring at me with a mixture of awe and terror. They had heard the authority in my voice. They had heard me command airspace. They realized, perhaps for the first time, that I was not just rich. I was a sovereign power. "Who was that?" Mark asked, his voice barely a squeak. "My security detail," I said. "They are 2 minutes away." "Security?" my father asked, lifting his head. "Here? At my house?" "The press knows I'm here." "Dad," I said, "in about 5 minutes. This street is going to turn into a circus. Every major news network in the world is trying to get the first shot of Phoebe Halston after the announcement. They tracked my phone. They tracked my car." I walked over to the window and pulled back the curtain slightly. In the distance, down the dark, tree-lined street, I could see the reflection of flashing lights, blue and red police lights, mixing with the harsh white glare of camera strobes. "They are shutting down the block," I said. "My team will need to secure the perimeter to get me out." "Get you out?" Bianca repeated. "You are leaving?" "Did you think I was going to stay for dessert?" I asked. I turned back to the room. I looked at the remnants of the meal, the cold turkey, the congealed gravy, the wine glasses stained with lipstick. It looked like the aftermath of a disaster. "I have a plane waiting at Westchester Airport," I said. "I have to be in Brussels by morning for a summit with the European Energy Commission, and then Tokyo for the Asian market opening." "But it is Thanksgiving," my mother whispered. "It was Thanksgiving," I corrected her. "Now, it is just Thursday." I picked up my coat, the old gray wool coat with the pilling on the sleeves. I put it on. It felt like armor. "Phoebe," my father said, standing up shakily. He looked old. He looked defeated. "Will we see you again?" I buttoned the coat. I took my time. "I do not know, Dad," I said honestly. "My schedule is quite full for the next decade." "We are your family," he said. It was a plea. "I know," I said. "And that is why I have to go. Because if I stay here, if I stay in this orbit, I will suffocate. You do not know how to love me without breaking me. And I am too important to be broken right now. The world needs me whole." I looked around the dining room one last time. I looked at the family photos on the wall. The shrine to Bianca. The shrine to mediocrity. I looked at the table where I had been humiliated. I looked at the parents who had tried to buy my dignity for $2,000. This house was not a home. It was a museum of my past traumas. It was a cage that I had outgrown years ago. But I had kept coming back to see if the door was still locked. Tonight, I had ripped the door off its hinges. "Goodbye," I said. I did not wait for them to answer. I turned my back on the table, on the money, on the guilt, and I walked toward the front door. The sound of my boots on the floor was steady and strong. I was walking away from the past and stepping directly into the history books. The beam of light that swept across the dining room window was not the polite, stationary glow of a street lamp. It was a high-intensity xenon searchlight, the kind used to cut through fog banks or illuminate crime scenes. It slashed through the sheer curtains, blinding my father for a moment and casting long, dancing shadows against the floral wallpaper. Before anyone could ask what it was, the sound arrived. It started as a low vibration in the floorboards, rattling the fine china in the cabinet, and quickly escalated into a rhythmic, thumping roar that I knew well. It was the sound of a Sikorsky S-76 helicopter holding a hover position 300 feet above the roof. "What is happening?" my mother shrieked, clutching her chest. "Is it an earthquake? Are we under attack?" "It is the media," I said calmly, buttoning the last button of my old gray coat. "And my ride." I walked toward the foyer. The family remained frozen for a second, their survival instincts warring with their confusion. Before they scrambled to follow me, they were drawn to the chaos like moths to a bug zapper, through the narrow window beside the front door. I could see them, not one car, but a convoy. 3 massive, blacked-out SUVs had pulled up onto the circular driveway, mounting the lawn and crushing my mother's prized hydrangeas without a second thought. They were armored vehicles, military-grade beasts that made Mark's Mercedes look like a toy. On the side of the lead vehicle, visible only because of the glare from the headlights, was the faint, matte black logo of Aetherist Dynamics, a stylized atom, the symbol of the New World Order. The doors of the SUVs flew open in perfect synchronization. 6 men stepped out. They were not dressed in the festive attire of Thanksgiving guests. They wore tactical suits, earpieces, and the grim professional expressions of men who were paid to move human obstacles. "Oh my God," Bianca whispered, peeking over my shoulder. "Are those guns?" "They are deterrents," I noted. The front door did not open. It was opened. The lock clicked, and the heavy oak door swung inward, pushed by a firm, gloved hand. The cold November air rushed in, carrying with it the frantic energy of the crowd that had formed at the end of the driveway. A man stepped into the foyer. He was 6 feet 4 inches tall, with shoulders that filled the doorframe. I recognized him immediately. It was David, my head of personal security. "Ms. Halston," David said, his voice cutting through the noise like a razor. He did not look at my parents. He did not look at Mark or Bianca. He looked only at me. "We have a breach at the main gate. CNN and Fox News have blocked the lower road. We need to move now." "I am ready." "David," I said. My father stepped forward, his chest puffing out in a reflex of territorial defense that looked pathetic against the backdrop of the tactical team. "Now see here," he stammered, pointing a shaking finger at David. "You cannot just barge into a private residence. Who do you think you are? I will call the police." David turned his head slowly. He looked at my father with the dispassionate boredom of a man who could dismantle him in 3 seconds. "The police are already here, sir," David said. "They are asking for our autograph. Step back." He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. The command was absolute. My father took a step back, shrinking against the wall. "Let us go," I said to David. I stepped out onto the porch. The sensory overload was immediate. The flashbulbs were not just flickering. They were a solid wall of white stroboscopic light exploding from the street. The noise was a physical wave, a cacophony of shouting reporters, the thumping of the helicopter overhead, and the revving of the SUV engines. "Phoebe, over here! Phoebe! Ms. Halston, is it true? 40 billion? Phoebe, look at the camera. Just one smile." It was a frenzy. It was the sound of the world waking up to a new idol. I pulled my coat tighter around me. The pilling wool, the frayed cuffs, the faded gray color, in the harsh light of the cameras, it did not look poor. It looked iconic. It looked like a rejection of their superficial standards. I walked with my head up, my gaze fixed on the open door of the middle SUV. Behind me, I heard the scuffle of footsteps. Mark and Bianca had followed me out onto the porch. They saw the cameras. They saw the lights. And in their eyes, the instinct for survival was replaced by the instinct for fame. Mark adjusted his tie, sucking in his stomach. Bianca smoothed her hair, putting on a dazzling, plastic smile. They rushed forward, trying to flank me, trying to step into the circle of protection, trying to get into the frame. "We are with her," Mark shouted to the security team, waving his hand at the press. "We are the family. Make way." "I am her sister," Bianca yelled. Posing for a camera that was 100 yards away, "Phoebe, wait. We will come with you. We can help you manage the press." They reached for me. They wanted to touch the hem of the garment. They wanted to be pulled into the ark before the floodwaters rose. But they hit a wall. Two of the security agents stepped between us. They did not shove. They simply occupied the space with immovable density. Mark ran chest first into an armored vest. Bianca was stopped by a raised hand. "Clear the path," the agent barked. "But we are family," Mark protested, his voice cracking with desperation. "She is my sister-in-law. Phoebe, tell them we are coming." I stopped. I was halfway down the stairs. The wind whipped my hair across my face. I turned around. I looked at them. They stood on the porch of the house I had grown up in, framed by the wreath of dried leaves my mother had hung with such care. They looked desperate. They looked small. They were grasping at the tail of a comet that had already passed them by. "Phoebe!" my mother cried from the doorway, clutching my father's arm. "Where are you going? You cannot leave like this. It is Thanksgiving." "Let them through," I said to the agent. Mark's face lit up with relief. He stepped forward, smugness returning to his features. "See? I told you. Come on, Bianca." "No," I said. "I did not mean let them come with me." Mark froze. "I meant let me see them," I said. "One last time." The agent stepped aside slightly, giving me a clear line of sight to my parents. They stood there, framed by the warm, yellow light of the hallway where I had been scolded for my grades, where I had been told to dress better, where I had been taught that I was not enough. I looked at my father, the man who had given me a deadline of Christmas. I looked at my mother, the woman who had given me coupons for soup. I did not feel anger anymore. I did not feel sadness. I felt a profound, clarifying emptiness. The cord had been cut. "Congratulations," I said. My voice was not loud, but in the strange acoustic pocket created by the house and the vehicles, it carried perfectly to their ears. "You finally got what you wanted. You have a successful daughter. You have a story to tell the neighbors." My mother sobbed, reaching out a hand. "But you do not have me," I said. I looked at the SUV waiting for me. The door was open, revealing a leather interior that looked like a cockpit. "Phoebe, please," my father called out. "We can fix this. We can talk. The money we did not know." "It was never about the money, Dad," I said. "That is why you will never understand." I paused, one foot on the running board of the vehicle. I looked back at the envelope that I knew was still sitting on the dining room table, next to the cold gravy. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said. "I hope that $2,000 is enough to buy you some peace tonight, because you are going to need it when the silence comes back." I did not wait for a response. I ducked my head and climbed into the SUV. The heavy door slammed shut with a solid, reassuring thud. Whoomp! Instantly, the noise of the world vanished. The shouting reporters, the thumping helicopter, the pleading cries of my family. It all disappeared, replaced by the hushed silence of soundproof glass and filtered air. "Go," I said. "Copy that," David said from the front seat. "Moving out," the engine growled, a deep, powerful sound that vibrated through the chassis. The convoy began to move. We rolled down the driveway, pushing through the sea of flashing lights. I did not look out the window. I did not look back at the colonial house with the white pillars. I did not look at the four figures standing on the porch, shrinking into the distance, waving their arms in a futile attempt to call back time. I reached into my bag and pulled out my laptop. I placed it on my knees. The aluminum was cool to the touch. I opened the lid. The screen came to life, illuminating the dark cabin with a soft, blue glow. My terminal was waiting for me. The cursor blinked, a steady, rhythmic pulse. Blink, blink, blink. It was the heartbeat of the future. My family was back there, trapped in a loop of their own making, obsessed with status and perception. But I was moving forward. I had a grid to stabilize. I had a climate to repair. I had a world to save. I typed the first command. Initiate sequence. Helios _phase _2. The code streamed across the screen, a waterfall of logic and purpose. It was the only language that had ever truly made sense to me. The car accelerated, merging onto the highway, speeding toward the airfield and the wide, open sky. I typed, I worked, and I did not look back. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It has been a journey through the hidden dynamics of family and success, and I hope you enjoyed riding along with Phoebe as she claimed her power. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you tuning in from a bustling city, a quiet countryside, or maybe your own secret headquarters? Please leave a comment below and let me know. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of revenge, justice, and turning the tables, please make sure to subscribe to the Blue Payback channel. Smash that like button to help us grow, and hit the hype button to make sure this story gets heard by as many people as possible. Your support means the world to us. Until next time.